the process around like shooting and screening a film is that once you're done with the film, you have to submit it to the Kenya classification board. And so when we're done with the film, we wanted to do a screening back home, and so we submitted it to the classification board sometime in September, I believe. And they banned it. And they banned it on the grounds that, one, it was explicit, and two, that it promotes homosexuality. So, yeah.
So it's not being screened in Kenya, ironically.
Yeah, you can't screen or distribute the film. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy to me, obviously, because this is one of the most wonderful films I've seen in a really long time. That goes to so many different places and is not a Western perspective, and in fact flips that on its head in the one duet where the guy comes to England. It's a completely refreshing perspective, and it was based on archive material, as you said. So the people who participated in the archival project and whose stories are being used, I mean, what has been their response to that?
Well, so actually, when we made this film, we made it for the community. We wanted it to first be seen by the people whose stories we collected. So for us, I think that's been our greatest disappointment, that the people who shared their stories with us haven't been able to watch the film, because those are the people who we made the film for. And so they're all really disappointed that they haven't been able to watch the film, but we hope that someday they will.
Yeah. So could you talk a little about the sort of genesis of the project and the process of turning it from these sort of collected stories into these little vignettes?
We started collecting stories about 3 years ago. As I mentioned earlier, one day we were sitting at the office, and then we started talking about the queer community in Kenya, and then we realized that there's never really been any documentation or stories about the community by the community. So then we had this idea to kind of go around and interview people, and so that's what we did. We first we invited like a whole bunch of our friends to the office and recorded them on our phones, and then we realized that we needed a wider group of people to interview, so we decided to go to kind of like the rural parts of the country, and so we went to places like Naivasha and Nakuru and Kilifi, and we interviewed a lot of people. And I think the most fantastic thing about that process is just how open and willing people were to share their stories. We did interviews that were 3 hours long, where you just sit with someone and they just like keep on talking and talking and talking and talking. And so for us, that was quite something, even just the collection of stories. And so then we found ourselves with all these stories, and they were so deeply moving and really phenomenal stories, and we wanted to share them with the community and share them with the world. And so the film was the first part of that. Yeah.
And there's a really interesting story in the way that you guys actually made this, because if I'm led to believe that none of you are filmmakers, which is crazy.
No, not quite. None of us have studied film. I'm a hotelier by profession.
A very stylish hotelier.
Thank you. Yeah, that was actually pretty ballsy of us. Again, just as we decided to go out and make and like collect the stories, when we decided to make this film, none of us had ever worked on a feature film. I mean, Jim, who wrote the stories and also was a director, I've known Jim for a really long time, and we've worked on a whole bunch of things together. And he shot a short film called Homecoming a couple of years ago, and I helped him. I was on set for that, so I kind of watched anew slightly how a set works. And so when we decided to shoot this film, we're a family of 10. There's 10 of us in the office. That's it. we had to kind of like distribute, and so it was like, okay, so you're going to do sound. You've never done sound. You're going to learn. This is the equipment. Figure it out. And so that's what we all did. And so like on set, I think like I was doing like production design. I was doing like casting and like all these things. Jim was doing like at least like 8 things. Njoki, who was the headmistress, she acted. She did continuity. She was the AD at a point. So a bunch of really strange people who are Googling how to do things and just like figuring it out on set.
Anybody who's thinking about making a film in here and hasn't yet done it, you have no excuse. None. And it's got to be that good too. In terms of casting, I know that some of the actors in this film are not actually LGBT. They don't actually identify that way.
No.
How did you find them? How did you find your actors? And what was the process of that like?
When we first thought about casting for the film, we wanted to cast only LGBTI cast. For many reasons, including security, of course, because we wanted the set and everything around the stories to be tight and not having to worry about the stories leaking and all of that. And then the more we thought about it, we realized that there's a lot of people who are allies of the community and who would be willing to do it. And so we opened it up, and we were very surprised. Out of the whole cast, I think only 6 identify as LGBTI. The rest are all straight.
And what does that say to the Kenyan government? I mean, in that last one, for example, you've got this sort of man on TV kind of saying the government is not doing enough to stop promoting gayism. And
that's like, actually an actual news clipping.
Of course, right. Yeah. And I'm just kind of wondering, because it seems to me, I mean, like, the question is then, is the repression top down or is it bottom up? Because it seems to me if people are getting angry that the government isn't doing enough, like, what does that mean? What are the political dynamics around that?
Well, I think the whole like anti-gay agenda in Africa, especially, has many different roots. As you had the member of parliament saying, a lot of people argue that 1, it's un-African, and 2, they use the religion angle. And so a lot of times that's what the community is always hit with, that, oh, you're not this is your practice, whatever you're doing isn't African. At which point everyone questions, okay, so like let's define what African is. Let's talk about what is African. Because quite often their definition, a lot of people's definition of Africanness is just around what's convenient for their argument at that time. And then the second one is religion, which again is quite often around convenience, because people have a habit of kind of like picking the parts of the Bible that they're going to use against people. And the thing with like politics, for example, in Kenya, is that if there's like an up and coming politician who wants to gain popularity really fast, the easiest way for them to do that is to go on TV or and like with the whole like anti-gay agenda, or present a bill in parliament, which is what happened with the MP. Because like I remember before that news clipping, I didn't even know who he was, and then like right after that, I think he was on TV almost every day for a week. Yeah.
And there have been some really strange bills that have been proposed, right?
Oh, yeah,
by some of these people. Like give us a taste.
There was, so that last one, there was one asking to stone all the gays, including any foreigners who were gay in Kenya. There was also lifetime imprisonment Yeah, those are the two most recent ones. Yeah.
But of course, this film is like beyond that, and that's definitely one of the things that I really wanted to kind of get across. It's not just about people being oppressed and persecuted. It seems so much more expansive and hopeful than that.
Yeah, like even as we collected the stories, what we wanted to show Kenyans is that the LGBTI community in Kenya, like, they're just people. They are bus drivers, they are fruit vendors,
Hoteliers.
yeah, and that their sexuality plays a really small part of their lives, because quite often, especially via media, if you go on YouTube right now and you search, I don't know, like Kenyan gays, the representation is like either like drug addicts or drunkards, or they only sample like one part of the community, which is always quite negative. And so that's a perception that a lot of Kenyans have about gay people.
Completely, and I think also a lot of Westerners have that perception that somehow all of these countries are, somehow backwards and repressed. But the irony, of course, is that it's Western evangelists who are going into these countries and actually it's kind of reinforcing a lot of the colonial laws that created this problem in the first place, right?
Yes, like Uganda is a good example.
Exactly.
That whole affair is funded. Well, those are we're looking into that at the moment, but we also need to be careful about how we do it, because we are prohibited from distributing the film. So even if we put it up, we would probably need to Geoblock Kenya. So yeah, there's still that. Well, during the filming process, no. But then after the film came out, there was quite a bit of backlash. In a sense, George, who is the executive producer and also one of the directors at Nest, was arrested. And well, so luckily the court case was dropped on the 3rd of March. But when we submitted the film to the classification board, so of course it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, because what the process is when you're making a film in Kenya, you first submit a script to the Kenya Film Commission, and then they tell you whether you can shoot it or not. So that's like a first line of censorship, because they have the right to edit. So they can tell you not to use certain words, and they can tell you to leave out certain scenes. And then, once they're happy with it, then they give you a license and you go out and shoot. And then after that, you submit it to the classification board. So we didn't have a license for obvious reasons. So when we submitted the film to the classification board, because that was the only way to get the film rated so that we could do like public screenings, there was like a lot of people got pissed off, in short, and so they looked for ways to arrest someone or as many people as they could, and so there was a bit of trouble, but it's kind of like died down for now.
So you guys are okay for now?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's always good to know.
Well, we've heard all like manner of really interesting theories about that. I remember, I think someone said something about the gray color in which like LGBTI people exist in the world, and we're like, okay, I see. No, but for us it was two things. One, it was we really wanted people to focus on the stories as you watch the film. And secondly, whenever films are made in Africa or about Africa, there's like the Africa color scheme, which is very golden and very exotic. And so we wanted to avoid that. standing here talking to all of you isn't a thing that we expected at all. Premiering at TIFF, winning an award at Berlin. It's been such a fantastic journey for all of us. We like as we were making the film, like every day we'd be on set asking, what on earth are we doing? Like every day. I think there's like WhatsApp messages and like text messages where we're just like constantly asking ourselves and each other, like, what are we getting ourselves into and what's going to happen? Yeah, because as I said, like we'd never really done this before. We never knew what would happen. So all of this, like, we never in a million years thought that we'd ever be here. We never thought that this film would be seen by so many people and be appreciated by so many people. Yeah.
I mean, I have quite a follow-on from that, actually, because you say that none of you were really filmmakers and that you just kind of did this, but it seems so mannered and so thoughtful and so well put together. I'm wondering, who did you look to? Like, what was your research process?
At the Nest, I think we one of the things that we're always saying is that we're very lucky to have each other. And so we, like, the guys at the Nest are like brutal. Like Jim, Jockey, George, like anytime there's a script, they'll go through it like at least for like 2 weeks and like change grammar and like look for like ways to add like nuances and all these things. And so I think we're very almost like harsh with ourselves, and we're always very careful to put out the best that we can. And then of course we also invited, when the film was done, when we had a couple of scripts, we asked a couple of people in Nairobi to come in and share their thoughts. And so, yeah, that was really helpful. Because homosexuality is legal in Kenya, I think there's always an underlying fear for everyone, because you never really know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. You never know when someone's going to decide to table a bill, and you're never quite sure what that bill is going to ask people to do. So I think everywhere we've been, there was always and there is an underlying fear. And then the choice either to be open or discreet is personal. There's some people who we spoke to who were just like, yeah, we're done. We've had it. We are not hiding from anyone. We don't care if someone's gonna come with like guns or like torches, then it's fine. And then there are other people who honestly live in fear, and they almost live double lives, and that's just the reality. The Nest Collective. We like to say we're a collective of people who like to do cool things. So whether that's in film or fashion or music or art, we're always very interested in discovering and exploring different ideas and thoughts. We're also very interested in deconstructing how things work. And so like Jim recorded, actually I think all of the music that's used in the film was made by Jim. And at the office we converted our bathroom into a studio. And so that's where like a whole bunch of music is recorded. And we ran a radio station out of that bathroom for 2 years.
You guys are amazing, really. Like, I feel ashamed at my own inactivity. You know, I feel like we should all be in government by now and like done all kinds of things, radio stations in space. Like, you guys are amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So even like with the music example, with music and music production, there's almost like a hierarchy that exists, and we all know that if you're a musician, that you have to go to a producer, and then this and this and this is like steps that of how it should be done. And when we set up the studio in the bathroom, we were interested in teaching artists how they can produce themselves because it's possible. So then we had like a whole bunch of artists who just come through and record stuff and do it all on their own. And so that really shifts things. And for us, that's always very interesting. And we're also very interested in telling stories, obviously. Yeah, and we are now working on the second part of the film is just one part. Because there's 5 stories, so that means it's still another 245.
Yes! It's like every year.
So we're putting together a book, which we are doing ourselves, which we're figuring out as we go. So
Googling
like
how to make a book. Right. How do you make a book?
So like now everyone in the office has like 10 interviews that we're all like transcribing. So yeah, we're all learning how to put together a book. So hopefully that should be done in a couple of months.